my name is Mary Ruley. I'm a student at St. Petersburg College, and I'm here to talk with you about the endocrine system. In this brief overview, I will talk about pituitary hormones and an acronym I've created to help memorize them, target cells, up versus down regulation, second messenger system, direct gene activation, endocrine gland stimuli, and endocrine organs. The pituitary gland is separated into two sections, posterior and anterior. Posterior being the back and anterior being the front. The posterior pituitary stores antidiuretic hormone and oxytocin. Notice that I said stores. The posterior pituitary does not produce its own hormones. The hypothalamus produces the hormones and sends them to the posterior pituitary to be stored. An acronym created to help memorize this short bit about the posterior pituitary is please put away the oranges. The P in please standing for posterior, the P in put standing for pituitary, the A in away standing for antidiuretic hormone, and the O in oranges standing for oxytocin. Please put away the oranges. Continuing on with the pituitary gland and its hormones, we'll go to the anterior pituitary. The anterior pituitary produces prolactin, follicle-stimulating hormone, thyroid-stimulating hormone, growth hormone, adrenocorticotropic hormone, and luteinizing hormone. So the anterior pituitary produces its own hormones and a lot more hormones than the posterior pituitary. An acronym created to help memorize these is always pick up the paper first and then go and get the laundry. The A in always standing for anterior, the P in pick standing for pituitary, the P in paper standing for prolactin, the F in first standing for follicle stimulating hormone, the T in then standing for thyroid stimulating hormone, the G in go standing for growth hormone, the A in and standing for adrenocorticotropic hormone, and the L in laundry standing for luteinizing hormone. Because this is a bit of a longer acronym, I like to think of it as if you were working in office for your boss and you were going to get his paper first and then go pick up his laundry. The next part of the endocrine system I would like to go over is target cells. Now, hormones go to specific places, and those places being organs, and those organs contain target cells. Target cells have receptors, some inside the cell and some on the outside of the cell. The green circle is the example of receptors being inside the cell, and the purple circle is an example of receptors being on the outside of the cell. Something that happens within those target cells is upregulation and downregulation. Upregulation, being the green circle on the slide, gives an example of more and more receptors being made within the target cell. Downregulation, being the purple circle on the slide, gives examples of less receptors being made. Both up and down regulation can occur inside and outside of the target cells. One of the two systems I would like to talk about from the endocrine system is the second messenger system. For this, I like to use the example of an orange being squeezed into a glass. The orange itself is a protein, and the juice leaving the orange is the message going into the glass. So, for a cell, this would be the protein being outside, the hormone being the message coming from the protein into the cell, and the protein staying on the outside while the message goes inside the cell by itself. The second messenger system broken into 4 simple steps. Number 1, hormone binds to receptor on target cell. Number 2, causes G protein to activate adenylate cyclase. Number 3, adenylate cyclase turns ATP into cAMP. Number 4, cAMP directs target cell on what to do. The second system I'd like to talk about today is the direct gene activation. Now for this, I like to use the example of a blender. A blender, you put everything inside and it spins it all together. So with this, the message and the lipid would go in the cell together. Something to keep in mind when learning these two systems is that the second messenger system works purely with proteins and that the direct gene activation works purely with lipids. Direct gene activation broken into 5 simple steps. Number 1, hormone moves into target cell. Number 2, forms a complex with a receptor. Number 3, hormone receptor complex moves into the nucleus. Number 4, binds to DNA of cell. Number 5, causes production of a specific protein. The next subject to cover is endocrine gland stimuli. There are 3 different kinds of stimuli in the endocrine system. To help remember this, I've come up with an acronym. Henry is nervous and hyper. The H in Henry standing for humoral, the N in nervous standing for neural, and the H in hyper standing for hormonal. Humoral is when ion and nutrient levels are monitored and hormones are released to correct imbalances. Neural is when neurons stimulate the hormone release. And hormonal is when one endocrine gland releases a hormone in response to another hormone. To end this overview of the endocrine system, I would like to go over an endocrine organ acronym. Because there are 8 different endocrine organs, I've divided it up into 2 separate acronyms. The first acronym being Please Pardon the Tardiness. The second part of the acronym being and generally plans punctuality. And so we'll look at those in Part 1 and Part 2. Part 1, Please Pardon the Tardiness, stands for pituitary gland, pineal gland, thymus, and thyroid. The P in please standing for pituitary gland, or another name for pituitary gland is hypophysis. The pituitary gland carries out instructions from the hypothalamus and produces and stores hormones. The P in pardon stands for pineal gland, and the pineal gland produces melatonin, a hormone that affects the modulation of sleep patterns. The T in the stands for thymus, and the thymus is the site of T lymphocyte maturation. The T in tardiness stands for thyroid, and the thyroid gland produces T3, T4, known as the thyroid hormone, and that is a hormone that targets general body cells and raises metabolic rate. The second half of the acronym is AND generally plans punctuality. The A in AND standing for adrenal gland. The cortex of the adrenal gland produces cortisol that assists in healing, and the medulla of the adrenal gland produces adrenaline, or epinephrine and norepinephrine, when needed. The G in generally stands for gonads. And gonads are ovaries in the females that produce estrogen and proestrogen, and gonads in males are the testes, and that produces testosterone. The P in plans stands for pancreas, and the pancreas produces insulin and glycogen and secretes them into the bloodstream to regulate glucose levels. The P in punctuality stands for parathyroid, and the parathyroid gland produces PTH, or parathyroid hormone, and that is a hormone that raises the blood clotting effect. So altogether, the endocrine organ acronym is Please Pardon the Tardiness and generally plans punctuality. I hope you enjoyed this brief endocrine system overview and learned a few tricks to help you learn it further. Thanks for watching.